So I am joined by a candidate running for Colorado Congress District 5, Joe Reagan, not Reagan. Thank you so very much for joining me.
Well, thanks for being here. This is fantastic.
Thank you. And so let's just get right into it. You said during an interview with Badly Needed and Long Overdue that Republicans wanted you to run with their party. What I heard was the Sorting Hat gave you a rare choice between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and you arguably chose Gryffindor.
That's right.
What was it about you that made them approach you?
Well, first of all, let's get it. My kids never really got into the Harry Potter thing, but I do know enough to know that, remember, there were some really good wizards that came out of Slytherin too.
Yes.
And when you dig into where we are politically today, especially into our community, there is a lot of conversation around where are we going. Mm-hmm. And so early in my career, before I ever even thought about politics, I was fascinated by this series of articles that was talking about how blue states live red state values. And it was this series of articles that broke out how policies in traditionally blue states resulted in policy outcomes were the things that the people in red states were talking about. So when you talk about things like family values and supporting working class Americans, that those policies were actually being implemented by Democrats in blue states and finding remarkable success. And from a very early phase, and then again being a nonprofit leader, I've had to work across the aisle for decades to achieve things for the organizations that I work with. And so when I am out there engaging with Republicans, what they hear is someone that understands the policy outcomes that they're trying to achieve, even though I'm really selling democratic principles and democratic policies using the very fundamentals of outcomes that they're looking for. And so I think, and part of the way that you win a district like El Paso County is by making that appeal and saying, hey, it is the Democratic Party that has the policies that's going to move this community in the direction that all of us want to see it go, right? We all want to see things like our community to have that unique character that it's always held. We want to have a place where our kids can feel safe in schools and succeed in schools. It doesn't matter what zip code you're in. We want all kids to be able to thrive. That's the thing most of us can get behind. And so I think when Republicans see that, they say, yeah, that's something I can get behind as well. I also feel like because I've been able to establish trust with people as a nonprofit leader, not just a politician, that's also lent itself to people saying, oh, this isn't someone that's just going to be a rubber stamp. This is someone that actually thinks through policy in a thoughtful way, that's willing to work with people on both sides of the aisle to get stuff done. And that is a frustration, I think, that both Democrats and Republicans alike are feeling, is that we're sending people to Washington that aren't, whether they're not truly interested in getting anything done or they're just not capable of getting stuff actually done. But we here in the community, or in communities across the country, are seeing that, and they're fed up with it.
Yes, they are. I was just at a town hall, and they were talking about how persons are fed up with Democrats actually working with Republicans, and they were wondering why Democrats would even try to work with Republicans. And so, thank you so very much for also talking about that.
Well, it comes down to mutual trust and figuring out where those common areas are. And I think, how many times have you heard, if you're rolling in the political circles, people joke about the fact that no Democrat ever thought they would find themselves saying, I kind of agree with what Marjorie Taylor Greene just said. And where the pathway to get to this healthcare affordability is probably very different. When you see those opportunities where a Republican colleague might say, hey, I see a problem here and I feel like it needs to be addressed. If we can work together to address that, that's exactly what we should be doing. Now, there's plenty of examples where you see Democrats that have sided with Republicans that contrast our very values. When you look at the government shutdown, we had Democratic leaders that stepped back from that. We had made a stance and probably could have recruited some of those Republicans to join Democrats to forward that policy. But you had some of these Democrats that weren't strong enough to stand up for the values that we were fighting for. That the longest shutdown in history was there because we were willing to stand up to say, no, we want to make sure that that Americans have affordable health care. And there were Republicans that were agreeing with that.
Yes.
And so I think had Democrats stuck to their guns and kept going, then we could have had some productive conversations with Republicans and got something done that would have benefited the American people. Because now, we're a month away from a second shutdown, and no progress has been made on this whatsoever.
Hearing that Republicans approached you, it's obvious that you appealed to both sides, as we've talked about. The obvious question here is, can Democrats trust you?
Yeah, and trust has to be earned. And so I think the more important question that I deal with every day is, how do I continue to build trust within the Democratic base to say I am a strong advocate for the policies that are important to the Democratic Party on issues like health care, on issues like supporting our schools and school safety. All of these things are things that I'm deeply passionate about. And we've seen those inroads. When you look at the meetings and the events that we host as a campaign, when you look out at that, you see strong supporters that are heavy progressives. But then you also see some of the more moderate Democrats built in there, and then you see a whole bunch of independents that we have now drawn back into the Democratic Party that have left, some of them 20 years ago, if not more. And I think that's that challenge that I face on a day-to-day basis, is to win this district, we have to win the trust of everybody.
Right.
But also making sure that we have that trust within the Democrats, saying, no, I am someone that is going to move forward this agenda. I am someone that is going to make sure that we're promoting things like the labor movement, to make sure that we're focusing on supporting our immigrants and those people that are in our community that are fearing for their lives right now because of the chaos that this administration has pushed forward.
Right, and something that we don't talk about often is that Democrats have a 20% approval rating.
That's right. And the last poll that I saw was Donald Trump has been hovering in the Republican Party about the 30% mark for favorability, and the Democrats are at about 20-something%. That goes back and forth a little bit. But it is a story that needs to be told, and especially in a district like this, to be able to move that agenda forward, we have to make that case not just to Democrats, but to the American public. That says, this is what we're going to be doing, and this is what I want to do for El Paso County, that is going to be the better fit, that can bring on some of our unaffiliated neighbors, to make that appeal to some of those centrist Republicans that might say, yeah, I'm fed up with this MAGA stuff as well, and this is someone that actually looks like they might not align with me on everything, but someone that we can work with to get stuff done. And that's what it's all about. And I think when you talk to some of the more pragmatic Republicans in town, a lot of them look back at Reagan and say, hey, what happened to the days when we could argue fiercely on the floor of the House about issues, but then sit down at the end of the day and be friends? And I think a lot of people are looking towards that mindset of saying, hey, we need to return to that, because we have to remember that we are not enemies. We have policy differences. We have a difference in how we want to approach these things. But fundamentally, I strongly believe, and maybe this isn't true for all members that are in office, but certainly when you look at our friends and neighbors here in El Paso County, I can't tell you, I couldn't point out a single person that wants to see bad things happen to our community. And so even if we have a difference of opinion on how we're going to get to that point to make our community better, if we can at least agree, hey, we're all trying to work towards the same direction. And let's make sure that fight keeps that in mind of, we're trying to do better for our community first.
Well, on that point, I have boomer friends, and they've mentioned that they don't know what's worse when Democrats and Republicans would be able to come together afterwards and in friendship, or they're fighting all the time. They don't know which one is worse, because they rather somebody, if you're going to stab me, stab me in front of my face. Don't wait until my back is turned to stab me. And so, what do you say to those boomers?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest issues that you face in politics today is maintaining that authenticity. Right, so you talk about, hey, at least show me who you are so that I know what that's going to look like. But it also requires us to relook a lot of these institutions. How do we strengthen these programs? Right, we talk about how for a lot of our seniors, they're continually worried about the status of our Social Security system. It is something that Republicans have gone after time and time again. Medicare is an area that we're seeing a lot of reforms. And Medicare costs are, and even though Medicare costs haven't been put up on a line item to go up, everything else that's happening in the healthcare system is going to cost those Medicare premiums to go up without a cost of living increase on Social Security. And so I speak every day with seniors who are really struggling. They're on a fixed income, and they are genuinely concerned if they're going to have to make that decision between paying for a prescription or paying for food. And that's just, it's sad. And it's exactly what erodes trust. And I don't think that anybody wants that. But this is where, from very early on in this campaign, one of the things that I said was, in order to get those centrist Republicans, those people that might not look at the Democrats and say, nah, I'm not really sure about those Democrats. We've got to meet them where they're at. And that oftentimes talking about these issues in terms of economic return. And so when we talk about investing, Social Security is not an expense, it is an investment. It is something that people have paid into over the course of their careers, and now being told, oh, well, we said we were going to do this for you. You took on your side of the promise, but now we're not so sure we can live up to ours. And that erodes trust not just in politicians, but in the system in general. And that's, I think, the most difficult thing we face as a country, is to reestablish that trust with a lot of these institutions that people rely on.
So, in talking about Reagan, many Republicans still identify as the party of Reagan. And you mentioned in a previous interview that your last name went a very long way in Afghanistan. Have you ever thought about using your last name to build credibility and bridge the gap between voters?
No, because at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to just say, well, you should just vote for me because my last name's the same as somebody else. That's to me, that's not an argument that makes sense. When talking to Republicans or the Reagan Democrats, as we would call them, now having an understanding of history and looking at what Ronald Reagan did to appeal to working class Americans to bring them over to the Republican Party, to be able to appeal to that again and say, hey, I get it, you voted for Reagan, you idolized Reagan, and here's why. Well, this Republican Party is so far from Reagan, it's not even measurable anymore. And so in that case, for me, it's not necessarily directly making the name connection, but looking at, hey, the Reagan era symbol represented a significant shift in how the electorate looked at both parties. And now we've made that other shift, and there's many voters that probably look at what's happening in the Republican Party and say, I don't know if this feels right. But yet the Democrats haven't made those inroads to say, you're right, it's not right. And the Democratic Party has moved in a way that has now brought back into the fold things like the labor movement that should have a stronger appeal in rural communities that have overwhelmingly gone towards Republicans. And earlier today I was talking to an environmental group and talking about how are we going to engage when it comes to clean energy. And I said, well, if you go out into some of our rural communities, every ranch out in the rural parts of this community and across the state, almost all of them have solar or wind. And it's not because they're environmentalists, it's because if they don't have solar power, they don't have power. And so for them it's energy independence, it's economics. And so making sure that we're bringing that message to them and saying, hey, when we talk about climate change, we talk about clean energy as Democrats, yeah, we believe in it as a moral imperative. But now the economics is also making a whole lot of sense too. And we want to move forward, and by doing this, we're making substantial investments in our community that are going to have that high return for all of us.
So, in talking about healthcare, you were previously asked in another interview about Medicare for all. And you said we first need to figure out why the bill is so big. And you also mentioned that you are the type of person to go home and figure out the numbers. Did you go home and figure out the numbers?
So it's interesting. So I spent a lot of time looking at unique ways to reduce the overall cost of healthcare. And what I've found, there's a few states that have started to implement these health initiatives. So in North Carolina specifically, there was a pilot program that ran between 2017 and 2019. And it was looking at, if we make increased investments in things like food security, how does that impact someone's health care? And what they found specifically was that by making sure that every family had access to high quality, healthy foods, reduced their medical bill by $85 a month. Okay. And so when we look at things like, when we talk about the fact that Medicare and Medicaid represent almost half of the federal budget, and you realize that those folks are the ones that are going to be disproportionately impacted by these same sort of social determinants of health, like food security, like housing insecurity, that if we can address those issues, it actually turns a return on investment because we see reduced spending in healthcare.
Okay.
And as another example that I often use is I've managed one of these programs before. Okay. And in one case, we had an individual that lived in a rural community, and in 1 year spent over $2 million in healthcare expenses. It was. Okay. Questions asked.
Okay. Yeah.
So we sent a social worker out to go meet with this individual, have a conversation with him. What's going on? Well, I couldn't pay my power bill. And because I couldn't pay my power bill, the refrigerator stopped working. And then my insulin supply went bad. Oh. And then I went into diabetic shock. And then I had to get a helicopter to fly me to a level 1 trauma facility for an inpatient stay, multi-day inpatient stay, to get me back to where I was going. And so just in this one instance, you're talking about $1 million of expenditure on healthcare expenses that could have been prevented by paying a $38 electric bill. And when you look at across the country, there are programs that are out there to prevent people from getting their power turned off for exactly that reason, but this person was not registered in that program. And so by then making that connection, registering them in this program, the power stays on, the refrigerator still works, the insulin stays right, you give them some education and say, here's some other strategies on how you can manage your diabetes. Now you've reduced all of that potential cost that would exist, and that patient is living a higher quality of living. And so those are some of those figures when you dig into it, where these pilot programs are out there, that data is out there. And if we were to bring those in and expand those, now we're able to actually reduce that cost of healthcare, and especially when it comes to emergency room visits. And one of the challenges that you're going to see if Republicans don't move forward on this, and you've already seen it, the cuts that are going to be made to Medicaid are going to cause these people to go, in our community it's about 75,000 people who rely on Medicaid. They're going to go to the emergency room when it's probably too late, and those visits cost far more than it would to make sure they had access to primary care. And so those are those things that we sit there and say, yeah, and these are those values pieces. Right, those consistent values of Medicare for all means a lot. It actually means different things to different people when you really dig into it. But for me, what we're all trying to get to is whatever your financial situation is, that shouldn't determine how you access healthcare, because that's just inhuman. So when we look at those programs as investments to make sure that we're all living healthier lives, to make sure that we're able to go to work, raise our families, and do all these things, I think that's the core of what we're all trying to work towards. And I think by addressing the cost issue that exists within the system, that's where we can make a lot of progress very quickly.
So preventing the need of healthcare.
In some cases, yes, but also, especially when you come to access to primary care, is leveraging preventative care to reduce cost at a better outcome for the patient.
Okay. Now, you've also talked about capitalizing on the space industry. And this is in reference to adding to Colorado's economy. Now, my husband, he works for Space Force. So as you can imagine, my ear is to the ground when it comes to everything that has to do with Space Force. Right now, this administration is trying to get Space Force to Alabama. What will happen if this administration gets its way?
So the move for Space Command to move from here to Alabama is going to cost us about 1,000 jobs locally. That is direct impact jobs. That does not account for those downstream jobs of, if you have 1,000 people working in this community working for Space Command, well, who's their grocer? Who is their hairstylist? Who is their, kids' teacher? All these things. So those sorts of jobs now start to go away as well. It puts a lot more pressure on small business. Then you have all of the defense contractors that are associated with that bring both defense and civilian jobs with them. Now they're forced to make the decision on whether or not to move. And so I think two of the major impacts that you face is, one, the fact that this has been in limbo for so much time. It has caused a lot of these major companies to prevent making investments in our community, to prevent bringing those new jobs. And diversifying our economy in El Paso County is going to be critical. And where Space Command can really help us is that when you look at those jobs that are associated with it, right, there is a growing commercial space industry that could also help diversify this economy. There is a huge cyber component of space systems that would also strengthen our jobs. And if you look down in Nevada with the UCCS Cyber Center, this is an area that could take additional federal investment, bring in new civilian jobs that actually strengthens all of our access to internet. And again, go back to our seniors, many of whom are targeted with various types of internet fraud and phishing attempts and all these things. We need to be doing these things, and there's a huge market for it. And so that's how we can bring high-tech, high-paying jobs through that utilization of Space Command. Now, one thing that I talk about often, because for years, this was a bipartisan, all hands on, like, oh, if we lose Space Command, like, this is going to be tragic for our community. And now that the president has come through and said, yep, it's going to Alabama. And suddenly you see some of these leaders being like, well, it really wasn't that important. And our own city council coming out and saying, no, we don't want the attorney general to sue the administration for doing this. What changed? And more importantly, what could they be doing? What could city council be doing that would be more productive? And then you go back to when the assessment was written as to where Space Command could be. The impact goes beyond Space Command. And now we're looking at how do we attract other missions as well. So when we look at the missions that are happening at Peterson and Schriever, even on Carson and the Air Force Academy, there's room for new missions to come in that could be additional investments into our community. Cyber missions, space missions, GPS missions, all these things. But if service members and their families can't afford to live here, which is where we're at right now, then those missions aren't going to make it. And so if city council, if our city leaders, our county leaders were serious about making sure that we were taking care of our defense economy, which for the time being is the driver of our local economy here, then they need to be tackling the affordability issue. At their level, there's a lot of zoning things that they need to be doing. Now, I'm not running for city council because I don't want to have to talk about zoning issues, but at the federal level, you're also seeing those cuts to programs that help with wildfire mitigation. We've seen cuts to the Forest Service. These are programs that keep our communities safe. And anyone that's a homeowner now is seeing it's not just the cost of homes that's going up. In fact, because the economy is going bad, now home prices are starting to go down a little bit. But insurance rates are skyrocketing. And that's because of the wildfire risk. And if we don't do something at the federal level to make sure that we're helping alleviate that, that's what we can be doing at the federal level. City council, county commissioners, they need to be doing their part as well by helping to alleviate the cost of housing. And that's partly with zoning. It's also understanding what the full spectrum of the problem is, because there's a lot of homes that are unoccupied in El Paso County, and they don't think they have a real good idea as to what our actual housing market looks like. So that's where it's not just about Space Command, but it's how do we make sure that we're continuing to attract these new missions that can drive other elements of our economy and help us diversify the economy as well.
Mayton insisted that I ask you the following question.
All right.
You ready for it?
I'm ready.
What makes you angry?
Do you know why she asked you to ask me that question?
Yes.
Okay. Because I don't get angry very easily. And that's actually not true. I don't show anger very often. And I think a lot of that does come from my experience as serving in combat. Anger is not always a productive emotion to embody. And so I do typically have a pretty calm demeanor, or at least try to for the most part. But what really does anger me, and even if I'm not showing it, is lack of leadership. Especially people that are in leadership roles that refuse to take on the responsibilities that that leader needs to be doing. And I think that one of the things that got me into politics was as a nonprofit leader, was working time and time again, day in and day out, and watching how these systems that were designed to support us weren't serving the people that they were meant to serve. And it was because people in leadership, people that were in office, weren't doing what they needed to do. They weren't taking on the responsibility that had been entrusted to them to make the hard decisions to make sure these programs were working for Americans. We talked about Social Security, right? Every working American has invested in Social Security because they were promised they'd get that on the other side. And now it's in question. Our veterans served our country, and now we see an administration that over the past, both first administration and second administration. In 2016, we were talking about possibly ending veterans homelessness in America. And then the Trump administration gutted the programs that we're working on. And we talk about our kids, right? We tell our kids, work hard, study, and then you'll get a good job. And we are failing them. We're failing to give them the economy that they need so they can have jobs. We're failing to make sure that our communities are livable for them. And we're failing to protect the environment so they can enjoy the natural beauty that all of us have had the opportunity to. It's our fundamental responsibility as the older generation is to leave a better world for the next one. And we have failed at that because people in leadership roles are not living up to what's expected of them. And that's what gets me angry. And that is why I'm running for office. Because I don't need to be in office. But if you're not going to take on the role of a responsible leader, then I'm going to do that. Because in combat, when you had a leader that wasn't doing their job, people got killed. And that weighs on you. And when you see that happen in real life, and you see that cost impact, that real life impact of a lack of leadership, it sticks with you. And so when I look at these sorts of things, I don't just look at it as something to get angry about and vent. It is anger that is driving a direction towards where leadership is needed, and that's where I'm going.
Last question. If anyone wants to help you, help out your campaign, where should they find you?
Well, we have our office right down here in downtown Colorado Springs. We have free parking, which is fantastic, so come on and just see us. But you can go to reganforcolorado.com. There you'll find the links to all of our different social channels. Someone Mayton joked the other day, she said, "You are a small town grandmother." Because, not the worst thing I've been called. Not the worst thing Mayton's called me. But I did the same thing. I was like,
I was not expecting that.
and she goes, "You can't walk 100 yards without someone stopping you and asking you a question or saying hello or talking to you about something." And my kids can verify this, by the way. My kids hate going out in public with me because we can't go anywhere without like 5 people talking to me. But apparently that's what small town grandmothers are like. 'Cause same thing of everyone knows them, everyone wants to help them, everybody wants to share what's going on in their world with them. So if you're not an online person, just walk around downtown for a couple hours. You're guaranteed to see me.
Behold the loophole. So I just want to thank you so very much once again for joining me, and best of luck on your campaign.
Thank you. Yeah, you're always welcome.